In this video, I want to make Power Query only update whenever my raw data table changes. In this case, I have a very simple data set, and we can see I have 5 rows in the data set, but I have 7 rows loaded, which means my file has changed. And unfortunately, I kept choking when I recorded live, so instead I'll walk through the code. I first loaded in the folder that I have my file in, because I need access to the metadata columns, in this case the date modified field. I filter down to my file, and I then access that column inside my date modified query. I load that into my table, which we can see here, and then I create sort of an Ouroboros where I load in my table to create a new query, and then I extract the value. I want to compare these two values because this is live, which is from my folder. This is what the date modified value was last time I updated. In other words, it's historic. And we can see that I have less accuracy in my milliseconds, which is why I can't do a direct comparison. I can't simply say, is date modified equal to previous date modified? That's why I make this third query, where I take my previous date modified and say -5 seconds, and then +5 seconds. And then I ask, is my new date modified time within this range? So is it bigger than -5 seconds, and is it less than +5 seconds? And if that's true, then my data hasn't changed, or rather, it has maybe changed, but it changed within 5 seconds. I think it's unlikely to happen. I have 2 ways to solve this, one using an error and the other using an Ouroboros. All I do is go in and access the table, and then I pretend like I'm doing something here using the function.invokeAfter function. And then in my last step, I say if compare time is equal to false, then I want to grab the previous step, otherwise give me an error. So if the previous date modified is different from the date modified, then a change has happened, and then I want to do my manipulations. But if there has been no change, I want to output an error, which is simply done using the error keyword, and then I can specify what I want to say. So let's close this. Actually, I haven't saved this yet, so if I press refresh all, I will get that data hasn't updated, which I get as a pop-up, which is the benefit of the error solution. It also only takes 1 query, whereas the next solution takes 3. And if I then save this, because I have made a change, actually let's just add some more rows. So if I now click refresh all, we can see date modified update and my actual query updates. The weakness of the method is then when you open up the queries and connections pane, it will always error because this is grabbing live data. And since it grabs live data, it will grab the previous date modified and the date modified. And since I haven't made any changes to the table, that means the new version of compared time will be false, which is why this errors. But I can live with that. So long as you never have this query pane open, it's fine. And again, the benefit of the method is you get an actual error message. And actually, it was this sheet where I load in my table. The Ouroboros method is then a bit more complicated. I start out by getting the extract data, which is where once again I would do some actual manipulations. To initiate the Ouroboros, I would then load that into my sheet. I would then load that in a new query called previous data, where all I do is then load the existing table. And now I've initiated my Ouroboros. The extract data query then has to be changed to connection only because it's not the one I want to output. That's simply the actual manipulations you do when you get new data. And previous data is then the existing table. Once the Ouroboros is set up, I can change what table I want to output, which is then the output table. It's almost the same code as in the error solution, where I'm saying if compare time is true, then that means I've made no change to my data, which means I want to grab the previous data. Otherwise, if I do have a change in my table, so if we delete these rows and save and update, we can see I actually do have changes, which means compared time is false once I update it. So the benefit of the Ouroboros method is that you don't get an error message, which might be annoying for your user. But the weakness is if you don't have any changes to the data, well then it's going to load in the existing table and then print it. So it will overwrite the data, and that's expensive. It's a pointless calculation to simply select everything and then overwrite it. And also your user wouldn't know that the data hasn't changed, and you might be okay with that. The method is fine if you just want to hit refresh all and be certain that you have new data. And again, like that would be annoying to get that pop-up all the time. But the drawback is that, again, it uses computational resources. That's pointless. And also you have to set up the Ouroboros and you have 3 extra queries, whereas with the error solution, you only have 1. So I would want to use the error solution because I never use this query pane except when I update and I need to see how far it is. So